Going to be a fun one.
So
So
I don't know as
Ukraine,
much about the Azov commanders stuff. I heard they were being, sent back to Ukraine. I didn't hear much about Russia's response, Russia's involvement, or even that much around the initial deal.
yeah. So my understanding on it is that whenever the Mariupol breakdown happened with Azov, that part of them surrendering to Russia was that they had negotiated a deal through Turkey that these guys would go to Turkey to stay there and be on house arrest until the end of the war and or the cessation of conflict, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And based on that, that they were going to just they were going to be there, and that way they didn't go to a Russian prison and maybe not have something bad happen to them, whatever. I don't know. But it looks like that Turkey negotiated a deal with Ukraine, and I'm sure that our government had some pressure in there to push them to move
I
these
mean,
people. I'm
there's
not saying
been
they did. I'm just saying,
well, I mean,
yeah,
I know there's been a lot of stuff with NATO around Turkey, and I know NATO's been upset with Turkey not playing ball with the typical NATO line on things, and Turkey's never really been like the full partner, but they need to control that strait. So it's sort of it's a
it's a love-hate relationship.
yeah, it's a bit tense. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if there was like you need to play ball or we're gonna have problems and we'll I don't know what kind of punishment that they can enact on Turkey, but they'll come up with something.
Yeah, so either way, and there's a lot of theories around why this may have happened. So part of that deal was that Turkey negotiated that, um, and you know basically it seems like that Russia came out and said that they didn't know anything about it, and so they kind of had egg on their face, and they kind of just upset, felt like they'd been betrayed. Um, and I think part of it, there's a lot of theories on why this could have happened with regards to like the wheat deal that was supposed to be going through, and Russia was supposed to be able to export wheat, and that hasn't really happened. And so it's a cluster. I don't think it's much of anything, but it is what it is. Um, but speaking of cluster,
Oh, I
our,
know you're good. I don't know.
our
I thought it was more like this just seemed more in line with like
our Pentagon decided that it's okay to send cluster munitions to Ukraine because, get this, we're out of ammunition. And I don't know that we're out of ammunition as much as we just
we
don't
need
have
some for
excess to
ourselves.
send. Right. But like the artillery, the 155 millimeter artillery shells that Ukraine needs to be able to fire out of the howitzers that we gave them, everybody's short on. We've begged, borrowed, and stolen from whoever and wherever we can, and we just can't manufacture it. And turns out these cluster munitions actually are a replacement 155 millimeter shell, so they can use them in that artillery. So we can at least send them something. Uh, Problem is that in '09, as part of the omnibus bill, Senate put in there, and Barack Obama signed into law that the U.S. cannot export any cluster munitions with a failure rate for the sub explosions, the bomblets, if you will, of greater than 1%, a dud rate of greater than 1%. And from my understanding, basically everybody kind of agrees that the failure rate's much higher, could be up to like close to 30%, which is scary.
But are you saying that this administration would lie about statistics?
I mean, no, and definitely I mean, they wouldn't lie about anything. They definitely wouldn't try to change the rules as they go or show special favors to anyone. Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have you address that in the economic section again, because those numbers are
which
lying.
part? The fact that that they found cocaine in the White House, which was originally like somewhere, who knows where, out in the middle of the parking lot. Now, then it was, oh, well, it was in a lobby area where people dropped their phones. Then it was like maybe it was in the library, but that's still kind of a public area. And so now it was like right outside the situation room, which actually means that you had to pass by, either pass through or bypass security. And the only people that bypass security are family members. So I'll give you two guesses as to who I think that belonged to, but
Jill. It's got to be
luckily
Jill. There's
none
no
of
way it's
that
gonna be.
matters. There's actually a theory that's floating around that they're gonna put it on Kamala.
Oh, that would. Ooh.
That
Oh.
then then if Biden either steps down or has to step down, then
This is how
Kamala
they get rid of
base
if they because they've been trying to get rid of Kamala for a while. I don't think it's gonna work.
I don't think it will either,
I
but
don't. I think that looks really bad to pin it on Kamala because I don't think people buy that. But if you can, or pin it on her husband or
this
something,
administration will do anything and everything they want to, whether it's accurate or not. I mean, they just levied charges against a whistleblower. That
yeah.
happened in
I
the
mean,
last
it's
week.
they're not even pretending not to be
S-
evil.
Yeah, somebody came out as a whistleblower, and what did they do? They pressed charges against him.
Like I'm a
Like,
I'm a whistleblower alleging that you're, abusing power and privileges, and they turn back around and go, well, we're going to abuse this power and privileges to arrest you.
I'm going to show you that I'm not abusing power and privileges by laying the fist down on top of you. Have
Yeah,
fun.
it's yeah. But getting back to Russia here for a second, um, the Azov thing seems like a trend with them where they are kind of constantly being embarrassed. I mean, not so much in their ammo production because they're kicking our ass in that regard, but the it seems like they're constantly making deals and getting burned, and then they keep making deals, but they keep getting burned.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what to say on that. I would tend to agree to a certain extent, but I don't know how much. I think part of it is that they're trying not to. My guess would be that they're trying not to look like the bad guy. And so if you're trying not to look like the bad guy, then you tend to will err on the side of caution. But I also think that Russia's going to keep this in mind down the road. So when Turkey comes back and needs something, sorry about your bad luck. Like, go call
Yeah.
your American buddies, which is going to be interesting because that's what the deal was. I forgot. I remember what Turkey got in exchange for these Azov
What?
F-16s.
Oh, that's right.
The
That's
F-16
right.
deal that has been like riding the line for forever, and yeah, we'll send them. No, we won't. Maybe we can. I don't know. That got approved.
And they're hoping that the
It's just a
F-16s
coincidence, though.
are a
It's not.
super.
It's definitely not
What do you
like
think that?
a tit for tat trade.
Oh yeah, okay. No one believes that. Absolutely no one. Like you don't even need to hide it. It's so obvious. It's like,
These people are
but
nuts, man.
the I'm just wondering. I kind of the F-16 is so old. I kind of feel like the S-400s have that programmed in by default as like a signature. Like the I'm not. That seems like
Well, I don't think that Turkey's going to use them against Russia.
it's up to Russia.
Maybe
I mean, it may not happen in Turkey, but Turkey is expanding their presence into, I want to
Syria.
say, is it Syria? Okay. I thought it was other areas of Africa too, but also Iraq and generally in the Middle East. And
And yeah, that's another
Russia's going to want to
theory is
expand
that
influence.
Russia, Russian-backed Assad forces basically laid waste to a bunch of, I think, Turkish-backed, I want to say Kurdish forces in Syria
Yeah, I saw the
here
aftermath of attack on
recently.
a Turkish base, and it's gruesome.
And so Turkey may have been kind of pissed about that, but that's all right. I don't think the Russians really care all that much. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean it's all part of the games. I mean the
Mhm.
cluster munitions is going to be interesting, and of course it is in and of itself a like just one more Hippocratic moment for the Biden administration because it was what I want to say October that they were lamenting Russians' usage of cluster munitions and saying how it was
Yeah,
a war crime and how bad it was, even though
I
there was
don't
no
remember.
evidence of Russia doing it and definite evidence of Ukraine.
Well, and I don't know when it was. Um, but yeah, I mean, sometime within probably the last year, like the U.S. government was calling out Russia as committing war crimes for utilizing the exact same type of ammunition that we are sending to Ukraine for them to use against Russia today. And yeah, and you're right, like Ukraine clearly used cluster munitions, and and part of those cluster munitions were also the I don't even remember what they call them, butterfly
Like
mines or
leaf,
whatever,
yeah, the little leaf
that
mines.
they're just nasty.
They're like toe poppers.
Yeah,
They're not. They're often fatal. I think they're
I don't think they're often fatal.
well, they're not immediately fatal.
They're
That's part of their effect.
yeah, they're an injury, but I mean like one of the biggest problems they have with them is they're plastic.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can't like metal detect them, and because of the color that they are, and I think you're right, it may have been October or something like that because I want to say it was in the fall because there were
That's what I'm.
leaves on the ground everywhere. You couldn't like they look like a leaf.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. They're that
you step
like
on one.
brownish green color, and
Mhm.
you step on one, like get toe poppers. Your foot is gone.
Yeah,
Um, Now it's enough that it might also send shrapnel into your femoral artery, and you may bleed out and die. But these are classic. I forget what the term is, but they're designed to kind of attack the like functionality of a fighting force by forcing them to deal with wounded.
yeah, it's designed to maim.
Yeah, it's the like they're still most. I think they're still more than 50% likelihood
It's
of death at some point.
yeah,
But
but I mean like not initially. It's not an
right,
initial death because it's the same reason that in the Civil War that the officers didn't sharpen their swords whenever they were going into battle. They intentionally took dull blades because if you're on horseback and you're riding through and you're hitting people, if you hit somebody with a sharp blade, you might cut an arm off, but it's a clean cut and it's easy for them to bandage back up and you can put that guy back out on the lines.
right.
So instead, if you hit them with a blunt blade, it creates fractures and cracks and internal hemorrhaging. And so now you've taken four people out of the fight to try to take care of that one person.
Yep.
It's the
There were
same
also, I mean, there was like the triangle shaped
trench knives.
bayonets, but
Mhm.
yeah, same kind of idea is like it's hard to stitch. It's often gets infected, and you like it's often fatal, but you just die a month later from infection. And so
Yeah, and
all
those,
of that time is using up medical resources, medical personnel, you know.
yeah, those would end up. I think those would end up being banned
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a few.
because you can't stitch them. They're just almost impossible to stitch.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're still banned, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure it matters as much. I
anything
think now
with
we can deal with it.
I think it's more anything with. Well, I mean, yeah, but when do we update laws that we've made years ago? It's
Whenever
a
they hinder the federal government.
well, that's true. Actually, we don't. Actually, we don't even update them. We just ignore them. That's really what happens.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
that's
I
that's
think
all
it's a
war
Hague,
crimes, Bill, right? Like,
right? I think that's a Hague Convention thing,
which
which we didn't sign on to, so I don't think.
and we in fact have, and I think I've referenced this before, the Hague. It's called the Hague Invasion Act. So
Yes,
I the idea of the U.S. criticizing other countries for war crimes has always just been eye rolling. It's like, okay, we all know it's full of shit because,
just remember, it's never a war crime the first time.
or in the U.S. case, the 25th time.
Yeah.
Like,
You'd have to
all
prove
war
that we did it.
crimes are just like, look, you're making us look bad. Stop.
Here's the other thing. The only people that get prosecuted for war crimes are the losers.
Yes. I mean, I think we've prosecuted some people internally, but I think it's mostly about trying to save face in an
More
ongoing.
scapegoats and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. It's there's a lot of scapegoating where it's like, oh, the people that actually did this, well, they're all dead, but that guy was attached to the same squad or platoon, but like 3 months after the event, we're still going to try him because we need to throw somebody under the bus. I think there's something like that during the global war and terror, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Absolutely.
I don't know. The whole thing is sort of like it's I'm really concerned about I'm concerned about the fact that we're out of ammunition. Like,
Well,
and
well,
and
we
correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of our ammunition is made by China.
no idea. I couldn't even tell
Okay.
you. I don't. It depends on what you mean by ammunition. If you're specifically talking about the 155 millimeter shells, I don't know who makes them for us or if we actually make them because we haven't used 155s in probably, I mean, maybe used some in the global war on terror, but I mean, probably the last time we actually used them was the Gulf War, and we didn't even, I don't think we used them that much. And let's be real, like our fighting force is not designed for this kind of war, so they don't really utilize, I mean, look at the difference between our 155 guns and Russia's, I don't remember what they are, 152s,
Sure.
right? Ours are made of super strong materials, but they also heat stress and crack and become brittle, so you can't fire them anywhere nearly as much as what Russia can fire theirs before they have to come out of the field and go back to be repaired.
Hmm.
Because we used them essentially like a 27-mile, or not 27 miles, maybe it's like 12 miles. Um, but we used them like a long range sniper rifle.
Yeah, I mean, we use them as like base support. Afghanistan and Iraq is like we would cover a bunch of fire bases with one artillery, one main base with artillery. And that was one of the ways we controlled an area when fighting the Taliban was we had artillery there, and so you would get a fire mission and you'd fire a few barrages, but then it would sit and cool down for a few hours, days, like because it would be
Yeah,
you'd be supporting an operation, not
right. It's
be the
intermittent
main part of the
firing.
operation that you get here in Ukraine. Sure.
I mean, Ukraine's firing what, 5,000 rounds of artillery shells a day?
Well,
Russia
it's
last count is firing 20 to 30,000 rounds.
but I mean it is yeah. I mean they're it's something like up to 10-1 ratio on a given engagement. Um, and yeah, it's some of this is though it's supply chain. Like the U.S. military
It's not
is
supply
set
chain.
up. What do you mean it's not supply chain?
It's manufacturing ability.
Well,
We outsourced
y-
the vast majority of our manufacturing because we wanted cheap Chinese goods.
but it's from a supply chain perspective that we did this. Like it's not just cheap. It's that the way the U.S. fights, we took the same private sector supply chain modeling that we use for most things and applied them to the military. The the problem is, to your point, we never expected to be fighting a war like this, and we didn't anticipate it. So we're expecting a the small protracted wars, basically, where we consume small amounts of munitions constantly compared to the massive amounts you have when going through stockpiles during like a trench warfare, where we're seeing in Ukraine, right? So it's the we're set up to optimize logistics every step of the way, which feeds back into manufacturing,
Maybe. I
right? It's
mean,
it's like we're not set up to manufacture a ton. We're not set up to and there's just a manufacturing aspect of it where we're just kept outsourcing again because we're referencing the private sector for this stuff, which doesn't have the same strategic implications.
I I think it's more systematic or systemic, sorry. Because it's a thought process difference between the way that the US thinks and the way Russia thinks. So Russia would
Yeah.
build a facility,
Uh
right?
huh.
Any kind of manufacturing facility, doesn't matter, but just a manufacturing facility and have it where it may run one shift a day for 5 days a week. Whereas in the US, if we have capacity, we are utilizing every ounce of capacity at all times.
Yeah. That's
And
kind of what I'm
so,
referring to a little bit. I mean, it's not the only aspect. There's other aspects to that same supply chain, manufacturing, logistics
sure.
tree, but it's over optimized.
Well, I wouldn't even say that it's over optimized. I would just say it's different, right? Like we're utilizing the full capacity that we can at almost any given time of anything that we're doing on most facilities.
Hmm.
Most manufacturing facilities in the US that I've ever dealt with run two
Right.
shifts, some run three, and so they're utilizing all that capacity instead of just letting it sit. Because if we do that, then that means we can get our prices down, which means we can make higher margins by doing so.
Right. I
Whereas
would.
Russia doesn't think of it that way. What they think of is they go, we need a facility, we build it, we hire people to work one shift. Like that's why they can, do they tripled their manufacturing of tanks, of artillery shells, and did it within a few months because all they had to do was just train people. They already had the capacity available. They just had to do it. And the other
Right.
thing that
And
they do is they overbuild all of their manufacturing equipment. So if it requires a 20-ton press for a safety factor of 1.5, in the US, we might put in a 30-ton press. Russia
mhm.
has all the old Soviet era crap that is like, oh no, we're gonna make it a 100-ton press and we'll never have to replace it ever. And they
So I think
you
it's
don't have
important
downtime.
I mean, I think it's important to draw the distinction between Soviet and Russia because Russia is actively trying to de-Sovietify, or there's a name for it, but their systems, because there was a lot of corruption and inefficiency from the Soviet era that caused a lot of problems. Not just inefficiency in terms of production, but um, making too big and not very nimble. So I don't know how much that's the adoption of Russia's um, paradigm and mentality versus how much of this is just a hangover from the Soviet era. Because I think if they're
Maybe.
designing their new stuff, I'm not sure they're doing it to the same degree that you're referring to. But I do think in general, they're a lot more cognizant of long-term thinking and recognizing, and this is kind of what I mean by about over optimizing, is that they recognize that if you optimize for one thing, and that is cost efficiency, you are going to make yourself vulnerable to sudden changes in the market. And I think we're seeing that a lot with the ammunition production and general uh, material production when it comes
All
to
production.
Yes, well, I mean, I think you're seeing this now in the greater economy.